to the Dream Journal. From the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, the Dream Journal is a weekly show where we explore the power of nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with listeners like you.
So there's no those vital minutes. Time is keenly found. We are not alone. Water over stone, even if you're by yourself.
Today's music is called Retrophecy. What is shadow work and how do dreams help? Our guest this week, Nicole K. Miller, will explain about the art of unstorying. I am your host, Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. We are also a weekly podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and view wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps. We've had some nice reviews lately. I really appreciate that. But most importantly, tell your friends. The mission of the show is to get folks talking about dreaming. So maybe start a conversation with them. You can find archives of the Dream Journal at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all those places. Also at our host, ksqd.org/the-dream-journal. We are a live radio show, broadcast every week from the Santa Cruz area. And I edit and release a podcast every Monday. Okay, Dr. Miller, welcome to the Dream Journal. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, so great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. Okay. So, Dr. Nicole K. Miller is the founder of a shadow work process called Unstorying. She has a PhD in mythological studies and depth psychology and over 20 years of teaching experience. She has spent a lifetime exploring how to break through the veil of the mind's stories to uncover the reality that lies hidden below. And her webpage is mindingthestory.com. So it's all about unstorying. So, Nicole, what does that even mean, unstorying? Let's go ahead and start with that.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds so mysterious, but I mean, the truth is that we, humans are storying animals, right? We tell stories about everything, and we usually think stories are about things we read in books or films or something along those lines, but we rarely connect it to how we make sense of our lives, right? Mm-hmm. What we think about ourselves, what we think about others and the world is usually in the form of some sort of internal story projected outwards. And so what my work does is look at those stories that we don't even realize that we are telling, that we're weaving this reality narrative moment by moment, and we don't even know where our perspective comes from half the time. Right.
Well, maybe you could get an example of how it affects your life and how changing the story can change your life, because it sounds a lot like what I've heard called reframing, like to reframe your life. It doesn't change the facts, but it changes the story about it. I wonder if you have some example that you could share.
Sure. And yes, it is related to reframing. There's an aspect of unstorying in the process that is a reframing the narrative or restorying the narrative. Right. And there's another aspect of it which is more of a non-dual approach, which is this sense that the stories are arising for you to understand yourself better and embrace the parts of you that you didn't want to or you've forgotten about. And so once that's seen, there's really no need to even create a new narrative. It's just seen for what it is, and the power in that. And so it has that other aspect to it as well. But yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, and it still happens to me. I've been doing this work for probably almost 15 years. And there could be a moment in time that you're having an interaction with someone, you're having a fight with someone, and really it's all about your own internal story coming to play and not really even about the event that's happening in the world. And so you might be operating under, I'm being unseen again. That person is not respecting my time or whatever it is. But often there's another story come to play. And so this process is a moment to stop and to think about what is causing that reaction in us. And you know, again, I should say, having done this for so long, it still happens to me all the time, you know, because I'm human and because the mind has such a kind of a hold on us, right? And it's crafting our reality every moment. And we're so programmed to see that as such a concrete reality, and can't see kind of how more subjective and malleable a lot of it, the interpretive aspect of it is. But yeah, I had something recently where I was doing a festival and I was presenting and I had a table. It was like a healing arts festival, and I've not really done those before. I've only done one before, and I shared with another friend a tent, and so all of the preparation was shared and everything else was shared. And this was the first time I was doing it alone, and you know, borrowed a tent, borrowed a table, did all of that. But I still felt really overwhelmed when I was setting up. And I found that every aspect of it was making me nervous and agitated. You know, I wasn't sure I'd have enough time to set it up. I wasn't sure it looked okay. Then where I was positioned, cars were driving by and dirt was coming up on it. So I was like, I can't set up yet until they're done driving by. And then that put me in even more, you know, time delay. And I found myself getting worked up. And a friend of mine who was at the festival, I went over and I was talking to her about some of these nervousness, and she just calmly looked at me and gently, because if you say it abruptly, it negates the effect. But she said, "Are you carrying a story about something about this? Like, is there some kind of story underneath it?" And it snapped me back into my own work because in that moment, I went, "You're absolutely right. I carry a story about sometimes having to walk through this world alone, or that everything is dependent on me to get done, and no one really wants to help me, or whatever it is. It may not even be true. I have lots of wonderful friends, some of whom are listening right now. But it's an old story that I carry. And so therefore, when I get nervous or upset or something starts to look like that, that story arises again, and I live it as if it's real." And in that moment that she pointed it out to me, I looked around and I thought, you know what? That's not even a real story. That's not even a thing that I'm not capable of setting up this table and doing what I need to do. And everything just shifted in that moment. The whole reality shifted.
Okay. So recognizing that we're in like a story moment, could that have to do with noticing we're having a reaction that's out of proportion to what's really happening in the moment? Okay.
Yes. In fact, that's the big red flag. You know, the to notice that you're in a story is when there's an outsized emotional reaction to something. And sometimes we look at it later and in hindsight we go, why did that set me off so much? Like, it shouldn't have set me off.
In relationship issues.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's always, it doesn't mean that the other person didn't do something that maybe was not okay or was uncomfortable or something along those lines. But the reason why we reacted so strongly emotionally is because it hit upon an old story of ours.
Right. Okay. And so how is this connected to shadow work? Because I think we're kind of edging toward this sense of shadow work. And so what is shadow work, and how is this related to the stories we tell ourselves?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of ways into shadow work. There's the depth psychological way in, which is primarily the route that I use. There's shamanic work in. There's all sorts of ways in. I think that the shadow basically are the hidden parts of our psyche, the hidden parts of us that we have forgotten or pushed aside. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they are trauma-filled or something scary. Often, you know, Jung used to talk about something called the golden shadow, which were the skills and traits and you know, beautiful parts of us that for whatever reason we've suppressed. And it could have been, as a child, you loved to dance and you were dancing around the living room all the time, and you had a parent who said, "Stop that, you know, be more serious," or you wanted to do some sort of career that followed your heart and it didn't make logical sense, and so you were told, you know, do something more realistic. And so if we take that in instead of following those impulses, we push that back into a hidden part of us, which we suppress. And so the same thing with experiences when we're really little, that we have a moment of expectation and we can't process as an adult would why something is happening or not happening to our expectation. So we create a defense mechanism about it. We react to it. We're not getting enough of something that we decide we need as that young child. And so those become stories because of the way that humans understand themselves in story. And so they become lodged as images, they become lodged as archetypes, as story moments, and then we tell that story again as an adult. The thing is, we don't often tell the story as if we were that young child because we don't often remember that moment in time that could have been just a moment. So instead, we relive it over and over and over, projected outwards onto our adult patterns and relationships and things like that. So a young child who, fell asleep and their mom had to go out and had someone else, watching them, and then they woke up again and they saw someone else there, might be totally fine and safe, but that unsettling of now what? I thought I was safe, and now there's something different than I expected. And if they're 1 or 2, they're not as able to articulate that or understand. And so that can translate later in life, if that continues to be unmet and unprocessed, as a unsettled feeling, not trusting that people will be there when you need them.
Interesting. This is something I've often wondered about, is how much of our patterns come from when we were pre-verbal. We couldn't even really respond or express what's actually happening. When my son was a baby, he must have been 6, 7 months old. I don't think he was even crawling yet. But I had his bedroom. I moved the changing table from one side of the room to the other, and he got really upset. And he was only a few months old, and I took me a few minutes to realize what was going on. He must have recognized the change and was not happy with it. It was like,
So
that was nothing traumatic by any means, and yet people, when they're young, even babies, really respond to the environment, and yet when they take it in when it's pre-verbal, there's no way to really define the things that happen. And how do you work
exactly?
That out?
And Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really great point. Two aspects. One is that, the adult who was looking at the child, from our perspective, it was not a big shift. It wasn't a big deal. So we often inadvertently discount that moment in time for that child because we see it from a much more expanded view than they can. The other thing is that, when I do the work that I do, there's one really great exercise I do that I ask people to think about a recent experience that they had that brought up a really strong emotion as an adult, something recent. And usually I ask for something that's like anger or frustration or anxiety or something along those lines. And to close their eyes and really feel that feeling and remember the experience that they just recently had. And then when they're in it, I ask them, how old do you feel? And it's like, what is the number that arises? No, don't overthink it. Don't judge it. What's the number that arises? Most people come up with something that is 8 or younger, usually 2 or 3, 5, whatever it might be. Sometimes they come up with something later in their teens or their 20s, and then I ask them if they've ever felt that earlier, because there's something about the way that it imprints on the child when that moment happens. If it happens when you're 2 or 3, you might be the most rational, level-headed, calm adult. But then if it's the same story that happened when you were that age, you lash out and find yourself having a temper tantrum out of nowhere, because that's the way you handled that core story when it first happened. And the same thing for the pre-verbal. If you're a very articulate person, you're able to have a conversation, and then something gets you and you just can't say anything. You're stumbling over your words. You're just mute in that moment. It's often because it hits upon something that happened when you were pre-verbal. And it's pretty amazing how the mind kind of logs those moments and then trots them out when it feels it needs to protect you again because, similar situation is happening now. we're going to react in the same way that we did when that age was.
Right. 'Cause
it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
So how do you work with that then once you identify an age and can start making a guess about what is happening? Like, I know that you work with people and their shadows with the storing business, and I want to get to dreams in just a moment.
Yeah.
But what do you use dreams, or just what techniques do you use that once you've identified an age?
Yeah, I mean, they're all tied together, and I definitely will talk about how dreams are tied deeply to all of this. But from the moment where they have the age, I tell them it's not that important that they remember the actual incident. 9 times out of 10, they won't.
Right.
And it's also not about finding someone to point fingers at and blame, like, oh, that parent shouldn't have gone out to dinner that night, or they shouldn't have moved that object, or right. It's not about any of that. It's just identifying why that pattern and story is happening over and over again. And so once that happens, I ask them to identify what are they feeling. To finish the sentence, I feel blank. And what is the core of that? And if they come up with something like, I feel unsettled, I feel overlooked, I feel whatever it might be, that sentence, they then can look and apply that to the modern day experience, memory that they just, or experience that they just talked about. Mm-hmm. And does it feel that same way? And often they'll be like, yeah, that's actually, if you take the projections away from the people and the context of the modern day moment, you actually can see that you were just that child again, having that same underlying feeling. And that's why you reacted as strongly as you did. And that's really the key, because it doesn't mean that you don't have to then respond. Depending on, whatever's happening in the world, often there is something that needs to be addressed.
Right.
But you're addressing it out of this place of understanding and not a reaction. You hear the cliche statement all the time of, respond, don't react, sort of thing, and like take a couple of seconds. Well, this is what you can do during those couple of seconds. You can unstory that moment. You can go, all that's happening right now is this is reminding me of that old core story that I carry. So I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to feel the energy that's in my body, because that energy has that flavor. And that's the energy that will send you back into another story of blame and of, anger or whatever it may be. So you sit with the energy until it starts to dissipate. And then you can either reframe the narrative, restory it. You can see a bigger picture. You can see the other people's points of view. You can see, you can change it from a victim to a hero journey narrative, which is, this is an opportunity, a call to adventure, to do something different, be something different. Or you can do the dissipating the narrative, the non-dual approach, and just simply be grateful that this is coming up for you to see that piece of your shadow once again. Because the more you're able to see your shadow, the more you're able to integrate it and become whole. And it's not about healing it or pushing it away, because that just creates more shadow.
Okay. So interesting, the non-dual approach, dissipating the narrative. So just recognizing that something is coming up and you have gratitude for that without really needing to create a new story. Is that the idea?
Right, because I'm using non-dual kind of loosely in this context, but it's really about understanding that we are far more than our, physical experience of the world and our mind's experience of the world, and we are also that. Mm-hmm. So there's a connectiveness to us, for us, to everything as being an experience of ourself. And so when we see that, this is not from a ego mind perspective of, I'm the center of the world and everyone bow down. It's really more about, you are that, as is everyone else in your experience. And so there's a simultaneous honoring of the other people who are walking this life and going through their own experience of it and their stories and things like that, and a sense that of how their interaction with you is for your deepening awareness of yourself. And so, again, another cliche phrase that's thrown around is that everything is happening for you, not to you. Mm-hmm. And when you really think about that at its core, That's what this approach is looking at. It's saying, oh, something ignited, an intense moment, intense emotion in me. This is what that's all about. This is just about me in that sense, why I reacted that way. So now you become grateful that that person kind of said something or did something or the situation occurred, that you have that opportunity to have a deeper understanding and appreciation for how everything is really connected.
This reminds me of what they call the many Buddhas meditation. Do you know this one?
No.
The idea is that it's a meditation where you assume that every person you encounter, every situation that arises in your life is a Buddha who's secretly helping you become a better person.
I would definitely say it aligns with that.
Yeah.
It also, in you're sharing that, it reminds me of the Ram Dass story. I don't know, from Be Here Now, one of his books.
Tell me.
He talks about having an altar in his home and that he often puts images and pictures of people he dislikes on there. He mentioned a few politicians, which I won't at the moment, but that he disagreed with or had issue with, and he would put them on there, and he would choose to see them as himself, as an aspect of himself that he was, at war with or fighting with, and be grateful to them for appearing in his dreamlike world, which is where the dreams come in, and I always found that really powerful to understand that, because that's next level, seeing in terms of the nature of awareness.
Yes, absolutely. That now we are in the realm of dreams when the people that you don't like are the ones that show up. Darn it. Interesting.
Yeah, they won't leave me alone, even in my dreams.
No.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but and from that context, you can see life as a waking dream, and that's also not a new concept either. When you look at Hinduism, Buddhism, a lot of different belief systems, this sense that we're viscerally experiencing this world, we're physically experiencing being in the world, and the experience of being separate from someone else, but it's also unfolding like a dream would. There are things that happen that seem logical, and there are things that happen that seem nonsensical, just like in a dream.
That's true.
Yeah, and so the more that we embrace that either is a possibility at any moment, then the more we're actually living in that, as opposed to it living us.
Okay, so taking waking life experiences and sort of living in them the way that a dream, taking them as dreamlike.
Yeah, seeing, there's, I hesitate to use symbolism per se, but seeing the experiences you're having as a way to look within. So the outer experiences always direct back in, rather than the inner emotional experience being directed out as a projection.
Wow, can you say that again? My mind just blanked out there for a second.
It's a Jungian concept. It's this sense that when we're looking at, and the same as with dreams as well, when we're looking at the symbols that are occurring, we're looking at, I'll give you an example. I'm going through some shifts in my own life right now in terms of, some changes that are happening in my day-to-day, and I was unsure what to make of them. So I went for a walk, and I was walking along the beautiful river that I live near. And there's all sorts of birds here. There's heron that live outside my door, and cormorants and other birds. And there's a bald eagle that lives in this little area. And I hadn't seen him in weeks, so I didn't know where he was off to. But I'm walking along this path, and as I'm thinking through some of my worries, some of my concerns, some of the things that are happening in my life, wondering how they're all going to come to be, wondering about some stuff that happened in my past and whether that's going to come to bear in whatever is happening now, and all of this, all of a sudden, the eagle flew from wherever he came from, and he flew right above me into the tree right next to me and sat there.
Cool.
And that hasn't happened, and it was in that very moment. Now, yes, circumstance, coincidence, absolutely, things happen in the world. We can't always make meaning of them. But this work would say that there's something in that for me to understand about myself. So, eagles represent being able to see things from a higher perspective, being able to kind of rise above a lot of the, things that keep you down and that are, nonsense. And so in that moment, it just struck me, what do I need to know right now about me? What am I feeling right now in this moment? That puts it back on me as well, too, and less on the eagle itself. Rather than interpreting what does an eagle mean and going into all the books to figure that out, it's what am I being reminded of right now? What is the feeling that's happening inside me? And it's a, there's a bigger picture happening right now, and I'm being dragged down into the minutia, and the muck, and let me just sit with that. And so I continued my walk from that place. And that's a way of interacting with the symbols that arise.
That's very interesting. Okay, so feeling from a feeling place. So it's about me and how I feel in that moment, rather than being so much about the eagle or even about the other person that we may be arguing with.
Exactly. And when I say feelings, it's not so much emotions, though it can be, because emotions really are just a flavor of energy that are triggered by thoughts and by memories of experiences, right? Our biggest memories are tied to an emotional response. So there's some neuroscientists did some research years ago. I'm definitely not a neuroscientist, so I couldn't speak to the actual research, but what I recall about them saying is that there's definitely the mnemonic aspect of memory is this moment in time that first thing arose, whatever feeling or emotion or reaction happened in the body gets lodged in there with that. And so when that thing happens again, that emotion automatically is attached to it and comes up again. And that also, in a way, goes back to the work that we were talking about before and why I then turn it the other way around in order to get back to that core and understand that emotion is just simply leading you into the story. And to separate it from the story in that moment gives you space around it. So it's the feeling, but it's also the intuitive, like, what is this saying for me right now? How am I experiencing this? And then it makes it more you than it makes it some sort of objective, symbol reference sort of thing.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. So this is Dr. Nicole K. Miller. So glad to have you on the show. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back. And I'm excited to talk about some other topics with Nicole, including Jung's concept of the big dream. And also I'd like to get into a little bit of lucid dreaming. Nicole's promised that she's going to say a little bit about lucid dreaming. And of course, in the second half, we will also take your calls. So stay tuned for that. We'll be back in just a moment. We are broadcast live from the KSQD studios in Santa Cruz and co-broadcast live in San Jose by KCXU. And I also want to mention that Dr. Miller's webpage is called mindingthestory.com. Welcome back to the Dream Journal. This is on the Squid, listening to KSQD in Santa Cruz. I want to welcome our far-flung listeners. Always great to have people streaming live. We've got Santa Cruz, Watsonville, Salinas, and San Mateo. We also have San Francisco and Grass Valley, California. Welcome to the Dream Journal. North Hollywood, California, Ashburn, Virginia, and Brooklyn, New York. So good to have you on the show. It is wonderful to have people listening in. There's so many different ways to listen to the Dream Journal, live, local, online, and in podcast. So next week we will welcome Margot Wilson, who advocates what she calls breath-induced vivid dreaming. I'm excited to talk to her. You can also check us out on Instagram and Facebook by following hashtag The Dream Journal, or follow my business page at Experiential Dreamwork. It's experientialdreamwork.com, but the social media tag handle is at Experiential Dreamwork. So I welcome our guest, Dr. Nicole K. Miller, who talks about unstoring. Her webpage is called mindingthestory.com. And we've been talking about the shadow, and we actually have a caller already, Nicole. So if it's all right, we'll go straight to the caller. Sandra is our caller.
Hi. I have a question. You were talking about shadow work before and shadow stories, and I was wondering, does your shadow story show up in dreams? And if they do, how would you recognize that?
A good question. Nicole, how would you handle that?
That's an excellent question, Sandra. And the idea that, often those repressed and suppressed kind of images and moments in time do show up as experiences that we're having in the dream. Hillman said that often it's the psyche's shadow play that shows up in the dream and then reverberates into our life, but that the dream is kind of like the underworld of mythic realm, right? It's this place where we travel into, and we might see something scary. We might see a literal shadow. We might see, we might have an experience that brings up things that we're uncertain of about ourselves, and then puts us in that position that we have to address it, either in a literal or a symbolic way.
Sandra, do you have a dream that you're curious about in this, or a dream image you'd like to share?
Well, I keep having like this reoccurring dream that I keep forgetting something, and it's always usually centered around like I keep forgetting about to like feed an animal that like lived under my bed or something like that. And I know in years past someone has told me like I always feel like I leave projects unfinished. So I don't know if that's like part of my shadow story or why I keep feeling like I keep forgetting that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally relate to that dream. Nicole, what would you have to say there? Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. What I find really fascinating about that is, first I would ask you, how do you feel about that animal that is forgotten?
I usually start to feel maybe like a little bit guilty, but like upset, like, oh no, like how could I forget that?
So there's a little bit of kind of that guilt and self-blame that you have somehow neglected, and that it's not okay, right?
Right.
And so there would be an interesting kind of connection for that with an aspect of yourself that maybe should have been nurtured, should have been taken care of, but was kind of pushed away under the bed, so to speak, and not nurtured, not looked at. And then forgotten about, and then there's this remembrance, so in that sense, it could be an aspect of the shadow. It could be a piece of you that that's represented, that needs to be kind of nurtured more and remembered. That would be how I would address it from a shadow perspective, in terms of that. But again, it would have to be something that would have to resonate with you, as if, does that feel like that could be true for you?
Yeah, no, that actually does make sense.
So there's a part of myself that I'm forgetting to feed. Is that
maybe like getting to take care of myself, or to do something that I need to look after within myself?
Right. Some kind of nurturing, self-nurturing, or self-care.
Especially because an animal is a living, breathing being, right? So as opposed to it being an object like keys that you can't find or something like that.
Yeah, it's always like a different animal, and usually like a small animal.
Yeah.
Never a big dog or anything.
Okay. So something that maybe is a small but important, because it won't go away. The fact that it's recurring is a real, I don't want to say red flag really, but I mean there's something that makes this important about this, that it keeps coming back.
Yeah, I would definitely say that when dreams do arise again, I tend to dream in threes when it's something really important for me to understand or see or know about myself. And so it'll either be the same dream 3 times, or it'll be a different version of that same metaphor 3 times, of something that I need to know for myself. And so the fact that it's recurring, that's definitely a sign that there's something in there that's of significance for you to understand about yourself. Yeah.
Do you I'm thinking that to suggest there might be some way to work with this dream in waking life, just to kind of imagine the part of myself that might be neglected, be small. And what's up for you, Nicole?
Well, one thing I would suggest is the experience of well, we could talk about lucid dreaming in a moment and going back in and directing the dream a bit, but prior to that, just sitting quietly and imagining yourself as that animal under the bed. And just see what would happen. If you're shifting your perspective from the person who is forgetting the animal under the bed and has the responsibility for looking after them and haven't, to the perspective of being what is under the bed, and needing nourishment and hoping that the person who is walking around will bring it to them.
Right.
And so by imagining yourself as that image, you may have some understandings that come to you of what that might represent for you.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Sandra, thank you so much for calling.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful example, and it gets us right back into dreams. So thank you for sharing on the air.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye, Sandra.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Dreams just bring you right to that moment, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And and again, I mean, that's a really powerful thing to realize, that, there's so many, as you know, there's so many theories on what dream images are, and whether it's just the mind's checking out for the day, or whether it's deeper communication with another realm, or whether it's processing your own internal information. And as many experts as there are out there will be different, as many theories, but for me, I've often found it can be a variety of those things, but that brings us, to that concept of the big dream, as you were mentioning before, and Jung often referred to the big dream as something that was really coming from the core of you that you need to know. It's more, you wake up and you remember it, and it's clear, and the details you remember, because we dream so much during the night and we don't remember the majority of them. But then there'll be one that really has these images in them and has this resonance for us. And that's something to really sit with and pay attention to. And so one thing to do is to really see yourself as all the aspects of it, because it's the starting point to go, how do I feel about this experience? What is this bringing up for me? And what could it represent? But then to be all the different elements in the dream and hear what their story is, bringing this back to the concept of narrative and story, because of how we understand ourselves is primarily through story. I should have said this earlier. Most people don't communicate with each other with bullet points,
right?
And when you go to a talk or a workshop and they throw up a PowerPoint, there's like a million bullet points. At least I just check out a little bit. But when they tell a story, you immediately are connected, and we are telling ourselves stories. We rarely, rattle off a list in our own head as well too. We're telling ourselves something. And so in a dream where there's images that show up and it's a powerful dream, pardon me, there is this sense of, being the other person. And seeing what information. That's something I do with Unstorying too in the world, is I have people do something I call flipping the script, where they tell the other person's story from a first-person narrative, including what they must be feeling in that situation, to expand the experience. And the same thing in dreams. I had a dream recently, I guess about a year and a half ago now. I moved into this new place, and I dreamed that there was this dark image at the foot of my bed, standing at the foot of my bed. And I could have been really scared, and it was kind of unsettling, if I'm honest. Yeah. But instead, it became a lucid dream where I basically said, "You need to leave. You can't be here right now. This is not acceptable." And the image wouldn't leave. And I tried everything I possibly could, and I finally imagined just a lot of light, shoving this image out the window. And it went out the window, and then it appeared again through my front door, all within a dream, but within the dream realm. And it announced itself, like who it was, and that this was its house. And I went, okay. So then I woke up and I thought, so what exactly does that mean? I'm in a new place. I haven't lived here before. Like, I'm not that familiar with haunting. Is that really what's happening here? And what I got the sense was that no, it was an aspect of this place and an aspect of myself within this place that needed to be addressed. And so the next night, I went back in and I dreamt it again. And
as a lucid dream, is that what you're saying?
As a lucid dream.
Okay.
And I talked with the image. And ask them what they wanted to tell me, or what they needed. That's actually the biggest key when you're doing this, is to ask the image what it needs. I do that in shadow work all the time. When people, I do get guided visualizations, and that is very similar to waking dreams. And so I bring them into a room of their psyche, where they can meet with their shadow in a safe place and just get a glimpse and interact if they need to see what it is that they need to meet. And often I ask them to ask it what it needs from them, because that's the piece that was missing.
Like these shadows that show up, they're not, they have needs. And they're created by unfortunate things that happen to us. May not be trauma, but just uncomfortable things that have happened. And they have needs,
Absolutely. And you have the ability, like I've done other lucid dreams where I've changed the ending. I've said, okay, I'm experiencing this, but the ending doesn't feel right to me, or it doesn't feel like something I would like to bring into my awareness. So I'm going to try a different ending, and then I see it out with a different ending. And so that's really when you connect with the imaginal world, both in living, daily life, in meditation and guided visualization, it ends up translating into dream work, I find, for me as well, because it all becomes part and parcel of the same thing. The same aspect of your mind is creating meaning day to day in that symbolic, imaginal way, as is when you go within, both in dream and in meditation. And you have more power and control over those images than you know.
Right. And so it's interesting, the idea of lucid dreaming and changing the dream and asking what that scary creature needs can apply to waking life situations, as you're saying, the lucid living that people talk about, that there's that maybe having the difficult conversation or asking that person, like I love that thing of Ram Dass putting on his altar people that he's uncomfortable with, that he's doesn't like, because there's something important there to learn, something important for me.
Absolutely. I had, one dream thinking, what the caller was calling, and we were talking about the POV shift and also, dreaming multiple times. And so I had a dream a few years ago during COVID, towards the beginning of COVID. And I dreamt that I was on a highway on-ramp that led to a bridge. But the on-ramp was 1,000 feet above a city. It was very, very high. I've never seen a bridge quite this high before. And I was on it, but I wasn't paying that much attention. So my speed was too high for the immediate, abrupt right turn, hairpin right turn that was needed to get onto the bridge itself. And so I found myself speeding and flying off the end of the bridge. And in the dream, I thought it was real. And so I realized the moment that I left the bridge and was flying through the air, I actually thought, oh, that was kind of a dumb move. Why, why didn't you slow down and pay attention? Like, that's on you. Not in any kind of like harsh way, but just kind of like a recognition that it was an action that I had taken. And then the next moment was immediately sending out my love to my family and friends and making sure that they knew I loved them. And then the next thought was a prayer that no one on the ground underneath my car was going to be hurt by wherever I landed. And an acceptance of my death in that moment, because I thought it was very real. And then I woke up from that, and I went, and that was what I would consider a big dream, from all of that. And there was something in the, if I don't slow down and pay attention, I'm not going to see that there's a huge change coming. And so the next time I had that dream, I had decided that I was going to leave. I was living in California at the time, and that I was going to move east. And I was unsure how that was going to unfold. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a place to live. And I decided to go and take 2 days and fly east and just look and see if I could find a place and if it felt right. And so I had a second dream that I was on the on-ramp again, but this time I was paying attention. And it turned, and I went with the turn, and I went on the bridge, but the bridge wasn't finished. And I didn't fall off the bridge that time. Everything just slowed to a stop where the bridge ended, and there was just fog over this chasm of how I was going to get to the other side. And I thought, okay, it's unknown yet. But I made the turn. I agreed that this is what's going to happen. So that's fine. And then when I couldn't find a place the first night that I came here, because I expected within 24 hours that I would find a new home and everything, right? That I had another dream that when I made the commitment that I was going to do it anyway, even though I didn't know how it was going to happen, I dreamt that I was on the same on-ramp, and that instead of turning and going on the bridge, it took off into the air and a portal opened in the sky, and my car, like in Grease, the movie Grease, went through to this new sky. And I went, okay then. So having the faith that this is the right move for me, however it's going to unfold, is just trusting in that. And that's going to be something. And I have to say that the next day I found a place to move to. I found a winter rental. I was able to start making plans to move to New England, which is where I live now. And since then, my life has completely shifted. And the focus has been on full-time doing the work that I'm doing now. Whereas before I was part-time because I wasn't ready to commit to it 100% of the time. I've been doing it for almost 15 years, but never as my primary business. And that was how my life was going to shift in a major way.
So through the portal.
Yes.
There's something about dying as a spiritual practice. I mean, even you got a pretty good test right there when you thought you were flying toward your death.
That's right.
To go through, instead of like, oh no, not me. Like you were able to accept it and bless the world that you had. And I love those different stages. Nicole, this has been an amazing conversation, and I want to leave this next few minutes at the end because I know that you have some events coming up that I'd like to have you offer to our listeners to tell people about.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Some of them are local to the New England area. Okay. So because our listeners are all over the place. But I do these intro workshops, intro to shadow work and unstorying locally. And I will be hopefully doing some online that people can access. But the most exciting thing now is that some of my clients had asked if they could be trained as practitioners in unstorying so that they could continue the work and spread it to their clients, people who are already coaches or therapists, and some people who are not either of those yet, but want to be able to help people see through the places that they're feeling stuck, these kind of repeated patterns that are keeping them from feeling free to let the world let their life unfold. And so starting next week on the 10th, it's online, it's virtual. There's people from all over the place who are part of it. It's a small group though, and there's only 2 spots left for practitioner training. It's the first cohort. I'm super excited. It's a 3-month program once a week. And I'm going to be teaching the basics, and people are, if they have not worked with me before, are going to get an opportunity to have their own personal unstorying sessions separate from that during the training, so that by the time they're done, they will have experienced it and they will know how to facilitate it with others. So that's super exciting. It starts on the 10th. And then hopefully it will be the first of many cohorts that I'll be hosting.
Well, congratulations on launching your new business through the portal. Not a new business,
Thank
but
you.
a new
Thank
level
you.
of the business.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. It's about surrendering to the dream. Surrender to the dream, because the dream is you.
The dream is you. Okay. So, Nicole, do you have any final encouragements you'd like to give our listeners before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I would say to really start looking at the things that you're experiencing and the things that are happening in the wider world, and see if you can uncover the story, the core story that is underneath, rather than following it into the external stories that are being shared, and see if you notice anything different. See if you find any insights about yourself that give you the space around the experience of it. It's a powerful way to shift your life, and I do this work with individuals as well. I should say, if anyone would like to work with me, I'd be more than happy to guide you through this process.
Wonderful. Dr. Miller, thank you so much. So glad to have you on the show. Webpage is mindingthestory.com. Well, do take care, and maybe we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Bye. All right. Thank you so much for listening. The Dream Journal is produced at the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, and we are live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific at ksqd.org. In case you'd like to call in or listen in to hear the live show, we are released the podcast on the Monday after the show. It spreads interest in dreaming when you subscribe, rate, and review. Please contact me if you'd like to be a guest on the show, to promote a new book, or to tell folks about your dream-related offerings. And of course, I also do individual sessions at any time. My name is Catherine Bell. You can find out about my dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. You can email me at catherine@ksqd.org. That's KATHERINE@ksqd.org. Follow Experiential Dreamwork and hashtag The Dream Journal on Facebook and Instagram to find out about upcoming shows. I'd like to thank Rick Kleffel, engineer and music creator, and also, I guess Rick answered the phone today, so I can thank Rick Kleffel for answering the phones today. Intro and outro pieces are both by Mood Science. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, take a minute to write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.